Happy 14th birthday to the Bitcoin Genesis block, the first Bitcoin block, paving the way for the Bitcoin network as we know it. This is all about Bitcoin, a show dedicated to all things, questions, and markets related to Bitcoin. Little B for the currency and Bitcoin, big B for the network, a collective journey to understand, apply, and use this innovation, all Bitcoin, all the time. Let's have a live look at Bitcoin right now. The CoinDesk Bitcoin price XBX index starting the year off trading pretty flat, now at $16,637, down about 55 basis points. The most reliable reference prices for institutions since 2014 are now published under the CoinDesk brand, trusted globally as the leader in crypto news, events, and data. All right, here's our CoinDesk Bitcoin News Roundup. Sam Bankman-Fried pleading not guilty to 8 federal charges of fraud and conspiracy linked to FTX, the insolvent crypto exchange he once led. Judge Lewis Kaplan, the presiding judge in the case, set a target date for the trial to begin on or around October 2nd, according to Inner City Press. And Sam Bankman-Fried's lawyers are asking the court to conceal the identities of 2 co-signers in addition to his parents that secured his $250 million bail. The lawyers cited privacy and safety concerns as Bankman-Fried's parents are already receiving threats to their physical safety. Finally, a jurisdictional battle between both the Bahamas and FTX are heating up as they prepare to take their case to a full court hearing later this week. Central to the dispute is who can have access to FTX's internal systems, such as internal Slack messages and QuickBooks accounting software. Each side is seeking to associate the other to the alleged underhanded deals of the crypto exchange's former CEO, Sam Bankman-Fried, and have publicly accused each other of being, quote, reckless in the extreme. All right, joining us now to discuss is Mark Kasten, who specializes in white-collar crime at law firm Buchanan, Ingersoll, and Rooney. Mark, good afternoon. Thanks for joining us. So, a not guilty plea from Sam Bankman-Fried, as was widely expected. Your reaction?
Hi, Christine. Thanks for having me. My reaction is that this was, as you said, entirely expected. It would be very surprising to see anything but a not guilty plea at this point, unless, of course, Bankman-Fried had a pre-existing deal with prosecutors, which all signs point to him not having now. Now, of course, that doesn't mean that a guilty plea might not be in the works. It's likely, in fact, that his lawyers are talking to the government, but for now, he's pled not guilty to these 8 counts here. The government appears pretty confident in its case, but trials take time, they take resources, and despite the government's feelings about the strength of its case, there's always some risk to the government at trial. There's a very small percentage of criminal cases in the United States actually go to trial, and so it's likely that as the weeks and months progress, Bankman-Fried's lawyers are going to talk to the government, and a deal might eventually take shape.
Interesting. Does he have a case? I mean, he has his former associates, his inner circle, Caroline Ellison, who's the CEO of Alameda Research, his prop trading firm that he co-founded, as well as Gary Wang, also one of his co-founders at FTX. They both pleaded guilty. Seems like they have a deal with the Department of Justice.
They do.
Does he have a chance?
It's certainly a very tough road for Bankman-Fried to hoe, especially with 2 of his closest associates, as you indicated, pleading guilty, and all signs pointing to them participating in the prosecution and testifying against Bankman-Fried at trial if necessary. Part of the deals that both of the co-defendants struck with the government include that if they provide substantial cooperation to the government, prosecutors will make what's called a 5K motion, which asks the judge to depart from the sentencing guidelines and give a more lenient sentence both to Gary Wang and Catherine Ellison. So they have every incentive to help the government. They have every incentive to testify against Bankman-Fried at trial, and they're likely to do that. So you're right. It as you indicated, it is going to be a very tough task for Bankman-Fried to ultimately prevail at trial, especially because it's likely his defense is going to be exactly what he's been previewing in all of his public statements over the past month plus, that he did not intend to defraud FTX's customers or lenders or investors. And in fact, he was just out of his depth. He was new at this. It was an immature company in a developing industry, and he didn't mean to actually violate any of the laws that he ultimately did. Ellison and Long's testimony.
Is that a plausible defense?
It's a very difficult defense, especially because ignorance of the law is a difficult defense and is not commonly successful. And it's even more difficult when Ellison and Long are likely to testify at his trial, and they're the ones that ultimately can say, yes, I had this conversation with Bankman-Fried. Yes, he knew this. We exchanged this information. That is really going to undermine any kind of intent defense that Bankman-Fried tries to use.
I don't know if you gathered anything from his countenance in court, or, the fact that he's pleading not guilty. Is that bad for sentencing? I mean, he's going to be dragging this through the criminal justice system. The judge may not like that when he has a case strongly against him, given that his former associates are testifying against him.
Christine, there's no doubt that defendants in the United States experience a trial penalty. If you take a case to trial instead of resolving it with the government, you are almost certainly going to risk leniency from the judge, and you are almost certainly going to end up with a more severe sentence than you would have had you ultimately resolved the matter with the government. Now, all that being said, this is not the time necessarily for him to enter a guilty plea, and him entering a not guilty plea to these 8 charges today is not hurting him at this point. Because as I mentioned before, it's likely that his lawyers and the government will continue to work toward a resolution if they haven't started that work already. And he's going to, hopefully for him, enjoy some leniency from Judge Kaplan if this gets resolved, whether it's a month from now or 6 months from now or 10 months from now even. Avoiding trial and saving the government its expending those resources is an argument he can use at sentencing to try to get some leniency from the court.
Do we know anything about Judge Kaplan? Is he a favorable judge? I understand that usually judges are prosecutors, and he formerly worked for defense in his previous role.
So Judge Kaplan, what I can say about him is he's certainly no stranger to high-profile cases, but he is not particularly, in my experience, he's not particularly a good draw. However, he did accept the apparent deal that the government cut with Bankman-Fried with respect to the terms of his supervised release, which a lot of folks thought was a pretty favorable deal for Bankman-Fried on that bail, the $250,000 bail. And the court accepted that. So that's a fair sign for him.
And we also learned that the co-signers of that deal have asked that their names be redacted from public documents. Mm-hmm. Is that pretty usual? They have a good case for that. They're concerned about their personal safety.
So that's a really interesting point. It's not typical to see that, but in this case, it's not surprising because counsel has made a case to the judge that Bankman-Fried's parents fear for their safety, that they've received threats. And it's reasonable for them to argue, as they have, that the co-signers for the bond are going to have threats to their safety if their identities are revealed. So to answer your question more directly, it's not common, but I'm not surprised that argument was advanced in this case.
So lawyers anticipate that this will be a 2 to 4 week trial, according to Mark Cohen, Sam Bankman-Fried's lawyer in prosecution. Does that sound about right?
That's in range, but these things, and that could grow or shrink as evidence is developed over the next 10 months. It strikes me as rather short. As prosecutors come to understand their case better, they may seek more time. I'll remind you that this came together very quickly in light of how long it typically takes to build these complicated white-collar fraud cases. The time between the fall of FTX and the indictment of Bankman-Fried, it was less than 2 months. I mean, that's lightning speed for federal prosecutors to do something like this. Now, I'm sure they've gathered a lot of information in that period. They've gotten cooperation from Ellison and Wong, so they have a lot of evidence. But as they build their case, that might grow. 2 weeks would be extraordinarily short for this trial, I believe, and it could go beyond 4.
Your forecast on the likelihood of trial?
I would be somewhat surprised to see this go to trial, simply because of the extent of the cooperation involved. I mean, the two people that worked closely with Bankman-Fried are cooperating with the government. They have every incentive to give the government what they need at this point. And if Bankman-Fried's argument is going to be that he frankly didn't know what he was doing, they really could be, Ellison and Wong could really provide the headshot for the government.
All right, Mark, we'll leave it there. Thank you so much. That was Buchanan, Ingersoll, and Rooney counsel, Mark Kasten. Coming up, trouble at crypto giant Digital Currency Group and BTC markets analysis from research firm Fundstrat after the break.
The chart of the day is brought to you by Crypto.com, the world's fastest growing crypto app.
Grayscale Bitcoin Trust shares trading at a 45% discount as a heated dispute erupts over Twitter between Cameron Winklevoss, co-founder of crypto exchange Gemini, and Barry Silbert, CEO of DCG, the parent company of Grayscale and crypto lender Genesis. Winklevoss accusing Silbert of, quote, bad faith stall tactics and commingling Genesis and DCG assets, while alleging that Genesis and DCG owe Gemini's clients $900 million. The letter alleges Gemini has awaited word on a repayment agreement for 6 weeks to no avail. In response, Silver's saying his firm submitted a proposal to Genesis and Gemini's advisors last Thursday. Meanwhile, Gemini Earn users have filed a request for class action arbitration against Genesis and DCG in response to Gemini suspending its Earn redemption program because Genesis froze withdrawals. Claimants allege that Genesis breached its master agreement when it became insolvent last summer, while hiding its insolvency from lenders like Gemini. Note to viewers, DCG owns CoinDesk. All right, joining us now to discuss is Sean Farrell. He's the Global Advisor Head of Digital Asset Strategy at research firm Fundstrat. Sean, thanks for joining us. So Bitcoin trading pretty steady to start off the year. Not much concerned about potential cracks in the DCG empire yet, or could we potentially see a further bottoming leg in the future?
Yeah, first, thanks for having me. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Yeah, so we've really seen, after that giant leg down in November, we've really seen vol start to churn, which frankly mimics the end of most prior cycles. First we have this, pretty big leg of price capitulation, where we see a lot of capital exit the market. And then we normally have a little bit of, vol churn, which we just mentioned, over this extended period of time. And then eventually, activity starts to pick up and we start to see a new cycle start over. So I think the tight trading ranges, while frustrating, is a good sign that we are likely close to a good buying opportunity. And then with, regards to the DCG fiasco, it's an issue that we've discussed as, the last remaining idiosyncratic risk, we'll call it, in the crypto markets. But I think what's tough to price in right now is, what the health of DCG looks like and what that means for asset prices. Asset prices will be affected if and only if there is a reason to that people need to market sell. Forced selling is what brought us down over the past, 12 months, frankly. And DCG is obviously, they own these trust products, and regardless of whether we see, if we see bankruptcies and these two firms are tied up in, legal battles that could extend months, it's not like we're going to see a lot of forced selling. And so I think markets right now are kind of, they're still on the balls of their feet, but there's no clear indication that there should be any additional forced selling from DCG distressed.
Is there concern in the same way that there was concern with FTX and Alameda and with Genesis and DCG problems that Cameron Winklevoss from Gemini seems to be alluding to? They're saying that DCG is potentially commingling funds between Genesis and DCG. It's a huge allegation without any evidence. And if anything, they apparently owe Gemini $900 million that they allege, and they've halted withdrawals at Genesis. Is there the same kind of concerns?
Yeah, again, the concerns are along a spectrum. I think there is certainly a possibility that DCG misrepresented their relationship with Genesis. A lot of that happened behind closed doors, so it's tough to speculate on that matter. I think it's important to understand that Gemini is, a U.S. regulated company. They took customer deposits for their Gemini Earn product and lent them out. And so there will need to be some kind of resolution there, and that resolution will happen under U.S. jurisdiction. And the latest move from the Winklevoss seem to be putting the onus on misrepresentation on the Genesis side of things, which would kind of take the onus off of Gemini, for incurring too much counterparty risk, and not vetting their partners, right? And would put the liability onto Genesis specifically.
All right. Switching subjects, today marks the 14-year anniversary of when Satoshi Nakamoto mined the first Bitcoin block. So maybe we could reflect on this achievement Bitcoin still, is up considering, 14 years ago, 16,637. Who would have ever thought? What's your outlook on Bitcoin?
Yeah, so full disclosure, we come out, our team's going to come out with our 2023 outlook on January 19th. Definitely encourage anyone interested in our services to sign up and check that out. But, broadly speaking, obviously this year, last year was very tough, but a lot of that, a lot of the troubles that we saw came from the more opaque areas of the market, right? The over-leveraged parts, the parts that I think you'd struggle to actually call crypto. If anything, the last year kind of reinforced the thesis of censorship-resistant money, composable and transparent smart contracts, and digital ownership. So I think anyone that, entered the space with that in mind should, celebrate today, celebrate the Genesis block and be excited for, what the crypto industry has ahead of itself. In terms of price outlook, I will say, we're coming off a year of, a year in which the dollar had more strength than it's had in the previous decade. We saw liquidity get sucked out of the economy at a faster clip than we have ever seen before. And seeing as Bitcoin has acted historically as this liquidity sink and this way to hedge against future inflation expectations. We obviously think that it's going to be a surprisingly promising year for crypto asset prices.
Fundstrat's Tom Lee, at the end of 2021, he said that Bitcoin could reach $100,000 last year, and that $200,000 was achievable. Do you still think that's achievable?
Depends on your time frame. Is it achievable? Of course, anything is achievable, but I guess you'll
anytime
have to
soon.
tune into our outlook.
All right. Ever the Bitcoin bulls at Fundstrat. Thank you, Sean. That was Global Advisors Head of Digital Asset Strategy, Sean Farrell. That's it for All About Bitcoin. I'm your host, Christine Lee, and don't forget to watch CoinDesk's coverage of the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas to find out how some of the world's biggest brands are investing and diving into Web3, blockchain, and the digital asset space. Live coverage kicks off this Thursday. And as for All About Bitcoin, we'll do it all over again, 3 o'clock Eastern Time. You're watching CoinDesk TV.